Go, Joe.
Hi, I'd like to welcome you all to the SCI-Arc lecture series. I'm Sylvia Wallace, an instructor here. I've been teaching here for 6 years, actually teaching Chinese architecture. There was a light here and now it's gone, so let's see if I can read my text. We have a couple of additional announcements. The lectures for March 6th and the 20th have been switched. Jesse Reiser is going to lecture on March 6th and Jeff Kipnis on March 20th. Also on Monday night, February 25th at 6:30 p.m., a number of the most innovative new media design companies from Berlin will be presenting their work. They do work ranging from web and interface conceptualizations, interactive installations for museums, and exploratory medical visualizations. That's February 25th. There are also upcoming special lectures in March, including Peter Cook on March 18th, that's Monday, Office DA, Monica Ponce-Leon, and Nader Tehrani on Friday, March 29th. So keep all those in mind. It's with great pleasure that I introduce to you today Ho Chang. He is a founding principal of the firm Atelier Feichang Jianzhu in Beijing, and he's also director of the recently established Graduate Center for Architecture at Beijing University. His lecture tonight is titled In-situ Architecture, a Chinese Practice. I first met Ho Chang in 1984, shortly after he graduated from Berkeley with a master's degree. At the time, I had little perspective on his background, realizing only upon seeing his thesis project that he had a highly developed artistic sensibility, demonstrated in beautifully drawn images of theatrical settings. His priorities at the time appeared to be an aesthetic vision that was relatively removed from the day-to-day concerns of building. Years later, when my own growing interest in China led me to teach Chinese architecture, I began to look for provocative examples of recent architecture in China. Despite extensive travels in both rural and urban China, I rarely discovered such examples. It was in this context that I came across Ho's name once again, as he had returned to Beijing in 1993 to begin with his wife, Lu Lijia, the first private architectural practice in China. This was after having taught at Berkeley, Rice, and several other institutions in the US. His work, though modest in scale, stood out amongst all that I had found for the subtlety of its response to sight, to light, to Chinese traditions, and to Western influence. The son of a prominent architect in Beijing, Ho grew up with aspirations instead to be an artist. However, within the rigid strictures of the educational system of the time in China, it proved more practical for him to enroll in architecture school. And thus he had an early bias towards a more theoretical approach in architecture. It was then with aesthetic sensibilities evolved in the US that he returned to mainland China, to conditions that were radically different from what we have here in the US. Extremely rapid urbanization and modernization, highly compressed design schedules, and a fairly undeveloped construction industry. Very, very high densities, averaging for residences 4 to 10 square meters per person rather than the 60 that we have here. To property rights barely emerging from state control. All of this requiring very rapid development of financial and legal infrastructures. Finally, to an architecture profession that was only beginning to recover from its decimation during the Cultural Revolution. So bear this in mind when you look at the remarkable work that he has to show us today. And in such a context where the typical response in China has been to create flashy replications of Western trends, Ho's work has stood out for the integrity of his explorations into the nature of a Chinese practice, of Chinese construction methods, and of Chinese design processes. With that, I would like to not spend any more time listing his accomplishments, which are really too many to mention. Numerous prizes, exhibits at the Venice Biennale, et cetera, et cetera. I will let Ho speak for himself. Let us all welcome Professor Chang.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I have a plane to catch at 11:30, so I'm going to go right into the talk. As Sylvia mentioned already, the title tonight is In-situ architecture, a Chinese practice. Architecture is site-specific, thus always in situ. So how can architecture be more in situ? So this is the argument I would like to try to construct tonight. So unfortunately, okay, here we go. So I would like to give you 3 different examples of in-situ architecture in China. The first one is in sometime between 1969 to 1975 in Inner Mongolia on a military farm. They at that time had a practice of building outhouse. A team of soldier farmers would come out early in the morning with a shovel on their shoulder, and then the team captain, I don't know if you can see me, the team captain would use a shovel to draw the plank on the ground like this, and then the other soldiers would do a ram earth wall according to that line. So in that case, of course, drawing is about designing. So design and construction, in fact, is very much, actually entirely done on site, on the spot. Even the tool, the shovel, is used both for design and for construction. Although for both, it's also, in both cases, shovel is a terrible tool. It's not very good for ramming the earth for. So that's probably one of the reasons all the walls, the outhouse would collapse eventually after a period of time. And then the same process would start all over. A team of soldiers coming out in the morning and do that. And another reason probably is more essential to really the quality, which has to do with central planned economy. So there is, in a way, no concern at that time for the quality or efficiency and really our productivity. So the reason I got to know all of this because this person here is my brother. He now lives in Los Angeles as a financial analyst. So he didn't become an architect because he couldn't really make a very good outhouse anyway. And then 20 years later, and actually we are looking at some construction sites around our university in Beijing, and this big construction site phenomenon was discussed by certain Dutch architect, as you already know. And in fact, for past about 20 years, there's a new kind of a pressure on the architects in China, which of course came with the market economy. That is not only quantity and the size, but also speed. So there's a different kind of on-spot architecture has been developed, which about making the design while the client is waiting. And the overnight service is also very popular. The record of speedy design is held by my friend here. He told me that at least once, but I remember probably he did it not frequently, but more than once, is to offer not only design while you wait service, and he did a huge project in 2 hours. So the client came in around 8 o'clock in the evening. In that time, he's back home. So the client went to his apartment and gave him whatever data and information about the site. I remember it was like a 4-block urban market, and then asked him to develop a scheme for in 2 hours, and he of course thought it was possible, and then the client would be sitting somewhere drinking tea in a different room and watching TV, and he produces all the drawings in 2 hours. And then maybe 3 weeks later on, he walking down the street of Harbin, that's where he was based, and he saw a building somehow faintly familiar, and then remember, hey, that's something I drew that night. How could that be? I mean, I was innocent enough spending all the time in the ivory tower in the U.S. So how could that be possible for the client and the construction company to do that? The answer was that if you do something really conventional, if you use a structure of 8 by 8 meter reinforced concrete frame, and that was possible. That thought, or that practice was very inspiring for me. So it means that if you stick to the basics, and then it's possible to accelerate. So here is our office last summer. And then in the 6 years going back to China full-time, and then really 9 years trying to practice there, we have been developing this strategy of in-situ architecture on our own, which had to do with dealing only with the basics. So the first one is a program. I have about 30 projects. I have an hour, so it will be 2 minutes for each project. That's going to be probably record speed for SCI-Arc. Maybe not. So anyway, so we have been doing projects of various sizes. This is probably the smallest one. We actually designed a door. That's a new door, and that's the existing door. It was used for traffic because it's more like a garage inside. Now it's just for people going in and out. So we inserted this door in the old door. The new door has a folding frame and a swinging door, and then the old door is sliding. So in combination, it's a sliding, folding, swing door. So that's how it's used. And then the second project is also about interaction between people and architecture. We were asked recently, last year, to design a piece of a sculpture. Since I don't really quite understand really the significance of having that project to be looked on, so we decided to do something people actually can use. So it's based on a traditional Peking opera stage. So because the prop, I don't know if that's a word, the only furniture anyway on the stage is always one table and 2 chairs. But this case is really used in the park for visitors. So instead of sculpture, actually like these French artists' work, we used the architecture as really a way to bring people and also landscape behind. And this is a bookstore we did using a similar way of thinking, basically starting the project with a program. And also in this case, since it was an interior design project, we did look at the old drawings and found out the space we used for the bookstore was meant for traffic. So what we did was to put traffic back into the space. So we had bicycle wheels put onto bookshelves, so they were nicknamed book bikes. So this is one of the details. One of the biggest problems we have in the office is to do nice details. This one is so far the best because we didn't have to do anything. They were bought off shelves. And then is some of the interior shots. The projection is really dark. So yeah, if it could be lightened a bit. And then in fact, the pivot in middle of the book bike are the columns supporting a mezzanine. There's probably too much. Sorry, I'm being very fuzzy here. Maybe, okay. So anyway, so you can go upstairs, and then there's the mezzanine level, and there are lighting fixtures here and also in the walls, so it becomes a big lantern in the bookstore. So the book bikes are revolved when the bookkeepers push them, so they would be able to reorganize the space inside. So, and even they were used as the door of the bookstore. Not last year, the year before, it's a little over a year now, the bookstore was demolished to become a real passageway for bicycles and cars. So for us, half of the bookstore, of course, is gone. It's half with books, and half of it, with traffic, and it's still there. Or we like to think that's the case. And here it's a similar idea, not with bicycles, but actually with how people may use the space. This is an office for an American diesel engine company, and it's a critique of the cubicles. So we decided to fully take advantage of the open space. We had a lower half of the office opened by dividing it with clear glass, and the upper half with translucent glass. So when you sit down and work, you can see the entire office, you can see through the window. When you get up to go to a bathroom or getting a cup of tea, and then you have some privacy. So how does it work for the people in there? All the Westerners, Americans liked it. I think they still do. Somehow all the Chinese and including Singaporeans, they all hated it. And I asked one of them, why don't you like the design? And I was told that they don't know that the Chinese don't know if they should sit facing their boss because you can see the boss, or they should sit with their back to the boss. That's a pretty serious dilemma. And then this is a research facility for the Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing. And we are given this program, which was very interesting because it's very much medieval. The mathematicians were meant to spend almost 24 hours there. The only time they get out to have a meal to a building like this far across from their building. And otherwise, they sleep there, they do individual research, and then they have conference, seminars, everything in there. So our approach to solve this problem is that to group the building in such a way they are potentially urban spaces being developed in between. All right, that was our intention. So this skylit gap and the bridges would give the mathematicians the chance at least to go, outside in a way, but also we are hoping that it would change the room-to-room experience into maybe a building-to-building experience, meaning that something urban start to occur. So this is the courtyard, and then you can look into it from one of the public space. And then the courtyard again, the typical research room. We use, this is the entry on the ground floor. We use a similar analytical thinking for the windows. We thought there were 4 different functions for the windows: the view, the light, the natural ventilation, and the artificial one. So we have 3 windows. This one for view and light. The opaque one is for natural ventilation. And then the lower is for air conditioner unit, this artificial ventilation. So that's the building. Now it's not really quite focused somehow, but it hides all the flaws in our building. Probably it's better. And using a similar idea, and this time we're bringing the different buildings, or rather mini buildings, out. This is a publication house in Shijiazhuang, which is about 3 hours by freeway from Beijing. And it's a typical Chinese development in a way. The publishing house itself would occupy this much of the building, but they built these big buildings so that they can have a hotel, restaurants, karaoke bar, or whatever, and then rental offices, public spaces including lecture hall and exhibition space, and also a basketball court in the back. So it's such a mixed program which inspired us to see it as not a singular building, but a group of buildings, and then we could develop, again, urban spaces. This is a garden which also is serving as fire escape. So now it's under construction. You don't see much of it yet, but this is the basketball court. It's already topped out. I just don't have the image here. So here we're onto site. So site is something, of course, terribly basic in architecture. We are taking on the issue in a number of ways. This is a renovation of a building which is not quite finished. If something happens also very often in China, an old building in China means that a building built 5 years ago, maybe. And then in this case, right before this residential block was completed, we were asked to redevelop the first floor into an office. So as a residential block, there's a gap between the street, the sidewalk, and the building. And there are bridges to enter the residential block. And since it's now an office, we try to bring the building back onto the street by turning the bridges into the showcase office. This is an office for computer rendering. Their clients are architects. So the idea here is the office would be where the client meeting would be held. So when the client looking onto the computer here, and in fact the passers-by would have a chance to see what the beautiful image they would have on the computer, and then they would go in and order one themselves. that, of course, really never happened because there aren't that many architects going by there anyway. And instead of changing the building, we're also adding pretty much a skin to the building. And this is perforated aluminum panels. So behind it, you can still see the original window and air conditioner unit. And you can see here the gap. And then this is part of the bridge structure. And here, site is about topology. And this is a house we did in 98. Was on a hillside. In fact, it was farming field during the 1970s for a while. So we understood that the reason the client wanted to come here is to be with the really spectacular landscape. So our building, which is here, is about how to bring the people and the landscape together. So we kept the different levels of farming terraces inside of the house. And then on the outside, the big roof, in fact, has the same slope as the hillside, which is 11 degrees in the courtyard. And on the inside, we had a number of little buildings, mini buildings again, which are serving as the dividing walls. This is 1.8 meter wide wall, but the inside is carved out to be bathroom, storage, fireplace, so on and so forth. And then these are the staircases going to 3 guest houses. They're like cubicles. If you remember, you actually saw them early on. See the different levels inside of the house. And then from those penthouse guest rooms, then you have a view again of the landscape. That was winter, the previous shot, and here is summer. And then here again also is about topography, but it's about the frustration we have in a lot of cases not to be able to engage the topography. The reason is that any site for development is prepared in 4 ways. It's called 3 connection, 1 leveling. The leveling, of course, is about bulldoze anything is not flat into a tabula rasa. And in this case, the site is right on the Yangtze River bank in Chongqing. And then our site, when we got it, already been totally flattened. And then we were asked to set back from the river, which is a biomedical research and production facility. So this is a view from the river. What we have decided in this case to engage the river or the topography only in certain places, or rather say in certain sections. So these are the view tunnels as well as pedestrian access to the river. And because of that, we were able to convince the client to take the typical wall periphery and the gate out, become one of the first, actually the first open complex in the area. And then again, we offer some views through on the first ground floor only. And this is the production laboratories and then research laboratories on the upper level. And this is the riverside. And here are one of the courtyards on the top level. For us, is just one layer of the artificial topography. And that's inside of the lab. There's one person, there's actually also a real person working. So the next project is in Qingdao, a city everyone here must be very familiar with, where the beer is from. And the brewery is not far, it's about there. And our project is on this hillside facing the ocean. So, it is part of the Pacific Ocean, but this immediate area is called the East Sea for us. And then, so the building, the conference center for Peking University here is about to descend from the access road all the way to the ocean front. There were 5 so-called villas. They were of the European classical style, which is a lot more awkward than these buildings here. And they were abandoned by a Hong Kong or Taiwanese developer, I don't quite remember. But we came in and also tried to make them part of the facility as well as part of the topography. So that's the building per se, and the staircase on the terrace roof to take you to the ocean. And then these are the one-time villa with faked pitch roof, ionic columns, and all that. Since none of those things were structural, so we just cleaned them all out. And then you can see a bit of the better. So now there are hotel rooms for the conference center. So on the rooftop of the one-time villa, again looking back. And then in fact forms a courtyard with all the surrounding buildings. So the next project is all version of SCI-Arc. It's that end, the far end. It's hard to see. This is an existing structure. It's a 1920 boiler room on campus of Peking University. We were asked to turn it into a nuclear magnetic resonance instrument laboratory. So we decided to put in, again, a mini building in the big building. The mini building has 2 load-bearing walls made of concrete, and then have steel beams cantilever out for about 4.3 meters on each side. So I saw some good cantilever there. And this is the top level, and then we are going, well, this is top level 1 is finished. So the building is freestanding, and here is the 4.3, and there's a gap between the existing structure and ours. The reason we're doing this concrete walls is to give enough distance between the footing of the old columns and our structure. And here is on the ground level, looking up. The instrument, in fact, is really amazing piece of machine. It costs about $8 million, but it looks like a little boiler, we see in a suburban bungalow. And this is another factory we converted into an art center in Beijing. Sorry that I'm rushing so much, so I'm not giving you all the information about the social aspects of some of these projects. Like this one, the art center is supported by a government-owned developer who wants to use avant-garde art as advertisement. And then we developed a garden, and an old textile factory, in this case, is being renovated. And half of the factory, however, had to be cut off because a new road is being planned right next to it. And we decided to keep the cut as much as we can, so that instead of elevation, we had to design, we just show the section of the building. So here it's literally a section. And that's the inside. In case you have a question, all the materials you have seen so far are all manufactured in China. And the U glass channel, it was a German technology, but now it's made in China and very inexpensive. And this is one of the events. It's a dance which was performed by construction workers and professional dancers. Now the developer sold out all the apartments, so I would assume that art did help, maybe art and architecture. And we are also interested in artificial terrain, which of course something probably now is being heavily researched and practiced in Netherlands. But the reason we are doing it is quite different. This is an exhibition we had in New York about 3 years ago, and we in a way entertained such idea. But the reason we are doing it in China is precisely because there are so many sites has been leveled for for the sake or in the name of development. Now we like to, whenever we can, to reconstruct them. Of course, not only putting the soil or rock back, but using architecture somehow as a way to make the reconstruction or restoration happen. So here is the exhibition of our work in New York again, but one of the things we discussed is this idea of artificial terrain. So that's another notion of site we have been working on. And then the projection shows some of our projects, and then with the idea of this ramp going up, so you end up going from New York to Beijing, as was the idea. Map of Beijing. Okay, and I'm going to talk briefly about tectonics, and in this case I'd like to use some of the student projects we have at Peking University as the example. For every, well, we only had 2 years so far, actually a year and a half. So for the first year we have design build projects. The first one was to develop a wood workshop and next to an old building we actually occupy. So the students here, you see them in action, is doing homemade lamination. They were laminate plywood together to use for structural purposes, and then putting it together. And there is a steel plate there in case you don't see it, because I don't see it. And so that's the finished product. So it's a little shed. And then the next class looked at the building and then start to design the insulation for the translucent roof. So that's the roof before the insulation being put in. And here the students have decided to use emptied mineral water bottles because it would give a good insulation. They did testing, it was very good, and then it would still allow light to come through. So ever since we were drinking mineral waters like crazy. So once we consumed enough, they were able to put it all together. So that's the ceiling. But basically what I'm suggesting is that, so we take on structure, we take on enclosure, we treat them as different subjects, but in fact through design, build, and put everything together. And that kind of experiments or exercise does, of course, influence our practice. Okay, next thing is about space. So when I really started to work in China, space is something I was interested, not only because, I am an architect, but also I thought space was where I could see something related back to the Chinese tradition. I didn't believe that architecture today has to look like what we had before. I don't think the tradition was only in form or imagery, but I thought really the space we had all along really was about the different way of living. There's a different kind of architecture. So in a very simple way, we did initially some experiments in more exhibition designs. This one happens at in a Vienna Secession. It's for an exhibition called Cities on the Move. What we did was to carve out, in a very straightforward way, a courtyard in the middle of the exhibition hall. So all the exhibits were pushed to the periphery, and with the void in the middle, and the void was this is on the outskirts, and that's inside of the courtyard. And the courtyard is used for audience in case of a performance there, and then it's also used as the stage and also as a place for reception, press conference, and so on and so forth. And then we cut holes on the second floor to invite people to exhibit their voyeuristic nature. And this is not a real person. This is an artwork. We're looking at late November in Vienna. So this is real. And this is a real person peeping into the space. And we also try to engage Chinese characters, the pictographs, as spatial diagrams. For an exhibition at Architectural Association in London, I picked these three words not for their meanings, but for the way the space is organized in each of them. And they were built as these suspended partitions. And then a Singaporean architect did the floor platform also with Chinese characters. And a third architect did neon lights. Okay, you see a bit here, which also is one Chinese character in a very kind of a loose sketch style. The word turned out to be his surname. And this is an exhibition at National Art Gallery in Beijing. In this case, again, we worked on some very abstract, perhaps simple enclosure, which had to do with not only architecture, also the city of Beijing, the inner city, and the outer city. And on the other hand, we thought architecture of China also had to do with ways of construction. Earth and wood were the most essential building materials. So that's why architecture was called 土木, actually earthwood, for a long, long time. So the wood we have, of course, is no longer the big timber, but plywood like such. And then the earth is not clay brick, but concrete blocks. These are actually shear blocks, but produced in China. And we borrow those materials from a manufacturer, and in this case, in case of plywood, from a stage designer who was the organizer of the in the exhibition anyway. The exhibition is to commemorate the 100 years of birth of the founding person of Chinese architectural history. So he's the one really tried hard to save the city wall of Beijing. Of course, he failed. So here we can go up this metaphorical city wall and see the entire exhibition, concrete blocks as a contemporary version of Earth, more concrete blocks. And we have been dealing with tradition, as I'm arguing here, as a spatial matter. So in this case, we are designing, it's called Small Museum of Contemporary Art by the client. So in fact, it's, you cannot say it's called Smoka, not Mocha, but Smoka. So it's located in his hometown, Quanzhou, the city of spring. And he actually is based in New York. He's the one, his name is Chang. He does explosions. I don't know if you have seen his artwork. He explodes all kind of things. He exploded one of the major riverbanks in Shanghai in October for the APEC meeting. So here's the two building types. One is a big courtyard house in the city of Spring. The next kind is called, this narrow one is only 4 meters wide but goes on really long. It's called a tall building. Tall is the piece of fabric you use to wash up. It's not a tower, it's not something tall. So we overlay that system. This building, this narrow, long, maybe Chinese shotgun would be better for tonight, onto the big courtyard building and start to move according to really the site condition. So and then we end up having a plan like this. Meanwhile, we are thinking, I had a meeting with him recently, so the project will go ahead now. We are thinking of using old materials taken from the demolition site of old buildings. Since these structural frames would have of different sizes, So we're thinking, so the roof would go according to really the dimensions of the available material. So it's more experiment in that regard. And then in the city of Spring, there is a tradition of reuse, recycle brick and stone in a particular way. So we would engage that tradition there as well. And the reason we have the building placed in a landscape painting, not real landscape, is because the site of the project changed God knows how many times. So by the end of last year, I told the client, could we just work with the painting for the moment? Because there was not a fixed site. Now we do have a fixed site, so the next stage we'll be working with a more real site. The reason he didn't have a site because the city government thought typically he had the artist client of ours had a kind of a commercial ambition. So any site our client was interested in, the city thought it would be good to develop something instead of giving to him. And now, of course, things are changing very fast. Cities start to understand to have a cultural dimension in the city would help more than just having another shopping mall or condominiums. And here is another effort we're trying to put together to engage the still available traditional crafts in certain area. This is a very remote area in the south. It's an existing village built about 700 years ago. We're doing something in the backyard for the richest resident of the village who return to build a house. And then here the courtyard becomes something continuous from one space to another. And then again, the roof form will be using the traditional technology, but won't look the same. So this is something, again, it's a house right outside the Beijing. It's for what's the word? Speculative development. So it seems it's going to be duplicated in a number. So we actually prepared the design in such a way that it could work with different geographical conditions. This is the one we are building now, but a number of other possibilities will be built later on. So we still are interested in a courtyard, but this time the courtyard is made by mountains on half of the enclosure and then buildings on the other half. And this is also a building built with earth and wood. The earth will be rammed earth, and then the wood will be laminated plywood. So this is a model, and that's the rammed earth wall. And now we are starting to construct the the plywood frame inside. So this is something I think I have done a little better than my brother. So if you remember, his outhouse was done with a similar technique. And we didn't want to use a concrete foundation because we were trying to be sensitive to the ecology. The site was meant to be a national forest park, but the nation didn't have money to do a park anyway, so the developer came in to develop it. If I were Cedric Price, I would say, no, I'm not going to do a house in an area which was meant to be a park. I'm an architect who was very hungry about building buildings. So I accepted the project. I want to do it as natural as possible. I wanted to have stone foundation and earth and wood, so they can now deteriorate one day and get rotten and go away. However, our structural engineer didn't really appreciate the idea as much. He thought we had too many unconventional things going on. He actually asked us to pick out one. He said, like, you have three very unconventional materials: the plywood, the earth, and the stone. I don't care which one, as long as you take out one, I'll work for you, otherwise I won't. So we took the stone out. So now it's a concrete foundation. This is for winter only, and we were afraid the humidity in the wall were not quite dry, so we dressed the wall up with a big coat, as you can see. And then the size of the project has been growing for the past 2 years. So this is right in the center of the city of Beijing. It's a development of an old area. So it says here, you may not be able to see, a new courtyard house is really what we have been thinking. The density of the city has grown tremendously. I think we here use also the floor area ratio. It went from 0.35 to 5 or 6. So in this case, we're saying there's no way we're going to go for 5. We should be very sensitive to the historic context, but we have to let it grow, but maybe just to double the density. So this is a 0.7. So we studied, you can barely see the existing courtyards without buildings. And here is a study of buildings without the courtyards. And this is our proposal so far of the new density. And then there are certain operations being done, like the courtyard house in China actually literally meant a 4-sided house. We're taking some of the size off, meaning that we're making 3-sided or 2-sided, even 1-sided houses. Also, we are narrowing down the front of the house, the width of the house, making a narrow courtyard house, like the tall building I was talking about. So this is one of the current projects. So it's going to be 130 houses altogether, next to Wang Fujin, the #1 shopping area in the city. Of course, for very rich people. And in fact, when I started to talk about space, people probably realized right away that I'm not talking about things as basic as some of the other things I talked earlier. So I started to relate space to tradition, to maybe a kind of a regionalism and things. So the question really is, can we be so basic? After all, I'm not so sure. So with all the important issues are pressing on, so a lot of times I don't know if we can stay simple or basic. So the whole issue of bamboo, of course, comes from ecology, although I don't think we have gotten very far. So we have done a number of experiments. I guess you don't see, but that's okay, I'll tell you. We started doing urban research on bamboo as infrastructure because our interest in bamboo has to do with 2 facts. One is that bamboo stems develops into a network, so it's not a singular plant, but a system. So it's possible, if you control the growth, it would grow into other infrastructure into a thing which would relate all the greens in the city. The second thing is that bamboo, for it to grow to its full height, would take not much soil. It's about 50 to 60 centimeters to have 6 to 7 meters tall bamboo, meaning that we could possibly to grow bamboo not only on the roof, also on the elevation of the building. So this is some of the early studies. The bamboo shoot is also a very delicious vegetable. I think you'll find them here in Los Angeles. So that's the initial idea for growing bamboo on the building elevations. And again, through exhibitions, I was able to experiment, or rather say starting the experiment. And this is a bamboo wall in Bangkok, and a bamboo roof on the top of a Villa Medici in Rome. The exhibition was called Garden, City, and Memory. And somehow, as a student of architecture, I remember studying Jean-Jacques Lecoeur, and I thought he worked in the French Academy, and that's where it is now. And of course, he did these fantastic drawings of vegetation growing on the building. So I told what I remembered to the director of French Academy, and he thought he remembered that too. So he gave me the approval to do this. And later it turned out Jean-Jacques Lecoeur didn't really come to Rome at all. So I think the name of the exhibition should be called Garden, City, and a Bad Memory, because the director and I, we shared something which is not quite right. And this is a Venice Biennale. We did a bamboo screen door. And here is a model house in Beijing, and using bamboo as, again, part of the architecture. It wasn't turned out quite right, but you can see the courtyard in cruise form in the middle here. And this is a bamboo, our second try to do a bamboo tower, this time in Shanghai. Now the project is in the Planning Bureau for approval, which is a work lift tower. So when I go back to China, I will know if it's being rejected by the city. And the last part, it has to do with city, because one of the questions I have had all along is this: if there's no contemporary Chinese city, how can we have contemporary Chinese architecture? You know, it's like if we could have Chinatown in New York, San Francisco, and but they are not Chinese architecture in Chinese city. How can we really define a contemporary Chinese city? Apparently, I don't really have the answer, but now we have opportunities to work on a large-scale urban projects. This is a city in the Pearl River Delta area. It's a township which we did planning for, and then we picked, we were asked actually to do this area develop it into a urban park. It's not so urban, actually, it's sort of an urban and rural mix kind of a situation which we are very much interested in. And so here is park, and then here is the town hall. And all the orange dots are bridges, because this meant to be, used to be a fishing farm. Now we are turning into a bridge farm. That's what we thought. So here is the stage and the lighting tower for the stage in the park area under construction. They had the first Cantonese opera last week on the construction site for the Chinese New Year. And here is the city hall, town hall. And we developed a sun shading system on the elevation and then on the roof. And more of that. This is actually aluminum louvers. You can probably see. And this is another urban project. This is about 200 hectares of land in south of Shanghai, where there are a lot of waters. It's about 40% of the land, in fact, is covered by water. So there's a tradition of having really water towns. So we decided we try to interpret the tradition to try our version of a water town. And then the way we have been working is this: we picked 6 primary factors for the site. This is water and transportation, circulation, vegetation. This is density and buildings, and that's actually for ecology. And then we make them into pairs, pair them up, and then have done studies of each pair. So it's like water with circulation. And then this is, again, this is the water with circulation and water with ecology. And then to see the different ways of using the water. The water has been used for circulation, meaning that we have boats, we have water bicycles going in the rivers, but there also is an ecological system as well, and also is a system of landscape. And more study is water and building in this case, vegetation and building. This is also an ongoing project. Our client, the developing company, is now fully behind us. So we are going into the stage of really to negotiate with the City Planning Bureau, which is actually no fun, but part of the work anyway. And then about the users on the site, the different type of people. And then for each the type, we plotted out his or her relationship with the different spaces, as well as different user groups, and then his daily or her daily routine, possibly through the site. And now we are breaking the site down into a number of areas, and then to build up what we call the idea bank. In this case, the client actually would have a hard time to really reject the entire scheme. Usually they would say, if he doesn't think this is quite right, and then we have a number of backups. We just change that fragment. I think this is the end. I rushed through the project to give us some time to discuss. This is our website, if in case you want to take a look. So I think I still have time to take some questions. You have to shut off because I can see it. Is there any questions? I guess not. That's it. No questions. Okay, thank you very much.